What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. Still battling this cold. I actually just took a cough drop, so hopefully my voice doesn't dry the fuck out too quickly. But I definitely had at least one more I wanted to go over because I actually own an album by this band, and it's Swedish death metal. That means HM2 stuff. And that means the HM2 slut in me gets to come out and play. So today I am going over the latest offering from Carnal Savagery, Worm Eaten. This comes out on the 25th of November, pretty much like everything else this week, on Moribund Records. This band formed in 2017 in Sweden. This is their fourth full-length overall, and actually their second this year. I did not know about the first one that came out this year, Scent of Death, which came out all the way back in April, but I have a feeling I'm going to be bringing up that one quite a bit, even though I haven't listened to it, just because 2 albums in 1 year just seems like a lot. Now, I do own their second album, Fiendish, which I really enjoyed. It's some high-octane Swedish death metal, nasty HM2 tone, very fast, very aggressive. Pretty much everything I like about death metal in general, plus that nasty tone. Now, this band actually formed from the ashes of another band, Divine Souls, which was a melodic death metal band from Sweden. I think they only put out a couple of albums. I actually have one of them, and they were decent. Admittedly, when I heard Carnal Savagery, I was like, this is way better. I like melodic death metal, but their brand of melodic death metal was, it was okay. So basing my interest in terms of reviewing this on the last album that I heard, Fiendish, which came out in 2021. So these guys are very prolific in terms of putting out albums very quickly. I actually checked to make sure Raga Johansson wasn't in the band, and he is not. So that's 1 out of like 300 bands that he's not in Sweden, which is pretty odd, actually. But I was legit excited to check this one out, and what I got on here is kind of middle-of-the-road Swedish death metal. Now, it is important to note that this was mixed and mastered by Dan Swano, so naturally, sonically, it sounds great. His mixes are wonderful. Everything is nice and clearly separated. Everything stands out in the mix. Even the bass is prominent. Guitar tone is extra chunky. The drums sound really punchy. It sounds good. My issue is the music on here. This is a very mid-tempo album, like almost through and through. This doesn't really break up the speed of this album very much at all. There aren't a lot of faster songs, but it is very much rooted in that old school Swedish death metal sound, so you kind of expect, like, you know, D beats here and there, a thrashy section. But what you get is a lot of kind of bare bones, very plodding songs that kind of meander in different directions and don't necessarily feel as though they were cooked long enough. Like, this really feels very bare bones. Like, you're getting the skeleton of a song in its most basic raw form, but there's nothing really flashy in them to really jump out at you. I think they had a little bit more fun with some of the song titles, like the opening track, Masticating Maggots, which, believe me, when I looked at it the first time, I thought that said something very, very different. I was like, oh, no, that's not cool. Luckily, it's just about chewing them, which is also awful. But this song opens up in just very mid-tempo form, like there's a crawling Slayer-ish sort of melody on top of the main riff. Again, the production sounds great. The vocals are fucking roaring in your face. It's got some decent riffs to it, and then the bridge hits, and that Slayer-ish melody turns into almost a Slayer melody. Like, it almost sounds like Dead Skin Mask. There's some notes that are slightly different on it, but it's really fucking close to home. But honestly, these first 3 tracks in here, Masticating Maggots, Baptized in Mutilated Innards, and Edible Cranium, as fun as the song titles sound, the songs themselves are very bland. Like, they're just kind of there. Like, yeah, they have all the basic ingredients to be a solid death metal song. Like, there's some decent riffs in them, but it's how they're combined and maybe the energy that they're actually played with or at, or however you want to say that. It's not very interesting. Like, it sounds like the band is just kind of going through the motions. And there are times where it's obvious. Like, one of the sure signs that I see is like a hellishly repetitious chorus. And you get that on Inhuman Sacrifice, Return of the Rotten Dead, and Baptized in Mutilated Innards. They literally just repeat the chorus line, the title of the song, over and over again, over a just kind of their riff. Like, it's not necessarily bad, but it really doesn't, like, you know, showcase any energy at all. Like, it just feels kind of flat. And to make matters worse, they don't really, you know, accentuate a lot of stuff with like lead melodies or atmosphere. Like, there's some moments in here where atmosphere is kind of shoehorned in, like the end of Return of the Rotten Dead has like this creepy music box outro but at that point you've already heard the rest of the song, and it's just sort of like a mid-tempo kind of slow basic riff, and it's just kind of a there song. So at that point, why bother putting like anything at the end? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Plus, it's Return of the Rotten Dead. Like, you'd expect to hear like a sample of like zombies going or something like that, but no, it's a music box just being played. I know that's generally creepy, like good for haunted house shit, but it doesn't really work here. And on the song Worm Eaten, there's like a section towards the end before the last, bit of the chorus where they just kind of pepper in like this marching snare and this slightly more atmospheric section. And again, it does nothing. Like, it kind of comes in late. Like, a lot of these songs just kind of start on their own. Like, they kind of just don't really bother with the atmosphere. Like, they just go for the riff and kind of hoping that the tone will carry them, which most of the time HM2 can carry itself by the tone. The tone's generally fucking awesome. But here the songs just feel like they're doing the bare minimum to be heavy. Like, this feels like it was very much thrown together, and this is where I want to come back to the whole Sent to Death thing coming out in April. I haven't listened to that album, but even not listening to that album, part of me thinks this might be like extra ideas they had on that album. They're like, well, we have enough for another album, why not put it out? I don't know that for a fact, but I feel like that's at least a warranted assumption, that or this was just incredibly rushed. Now, this wasn't all bad. There are some songs in here I did like Disemboweled. I think that song is actually pretty decent. There's some really cool melodies on it, and it kind of bridges this little gap between mellow death and, Swedish death metal. Like, there's definitely some stuff that is more akin to like old In Flames riffs or old Hypocrisy riffs, kind of mixed in with that Entombed and Dismember vibe. There's some really good galloping drums on there. I think the riffs are a little bit more intense. There's a nice stomping, like bolt thrower sort of vibe to the chorus section. And a song like Revel in Madness actually kind of breaks this album up where it really needed it, like to the point where this song should have been much earlier on in the album. It's the first one to really break out a flat-out D beat, and that's kind of something I expect out of Swedish death metal, because up until that point, which Revel in Madness is track 7, this is a very mid-tempo affair that really does not deviate much from the chorus. Revel brings in the D beat, the little bit of that punky energy to kind of spice it up. It's a decent song, but I was so thankful that the energy finally got ramped up a bit, that, it just kind of brought some new life to this and kind of drew me back in, because, man, I was really struggling to write different stuff about these songs. A lot of these songs really run together, like, save a few moments, like Baptized and Mutilated Innards, despite that really repetitive chorus, has some very interesting, like, death doomy moments. Like, the opening of it kind of has this, like, Candlemass, like, sort of swing to it, and then that pivots back and forth between that and a flat-out giant death doom breakdown, like kind of like early Hooded Menace. But it's the transitions between the two, like it feels like two different songs that were kind of just shoehorned together and broken up to make one song that was just okay. And there's a little bit of death doom on Inhuman Sacrifice to start off, but it eventually just kind of shifts into that same mid-tempo gear that this album is pretty much stuck on. But I will say towards the end they do get a little bit more lively with Perpetual Suffering and Miasma of Putrid Decay. Both of these songs finally get fast, like, almost like blast beat fast. Like, they're very thrashy, they're way more energetic, and there's groovy sections pocketed in between those faster moments. And this is the energy that I kind of expected. And it doesn't come until just about the end of the fucking album. And this album isn't very long. It's like a little bit over 35 minutes, I believe. But man, like, in terms of the pacing in this, like, this is stuck in one gear for so long that anything else to sort of spice it up becomes such a breath of fresh air, regardless of whether or not it's like really good or not. But even those more energetic tracks, I still had some issues with, like Miasma Putrid Decay. The song ends too quickly. In fact, it fades out on a section where you think they're going into like another bridge and then gonna like bookend the chorus or something like that. It just kind of fades out on a section where this feels like an incomplete song. And that incompleteness continues with the last track, Evil Incarnate, which is under a minute long. It's essentially just a cool, like, kind of death doomy melody. Like, there's a really nice guitar harmony towards the end, but it's not even a minute long. There's like a spoken word section on it, which sounds like he's grumbling through an intercom at a McDonald's, and then it just fades out and ends. And that's the end of the album. I believe there's a bonus track in the CD version, but I only had the Spotify version. I had to suffer through fucking stupid commercials, but I didn't want to listen to that bonus track or find it, just because nothing on this album really interested me, and I was really just kind of bored with it. This doesn't really even feel like an album. This feels like a collection of songs that they're just kind of thrown together and put on an album and unfortunately rushed out. Like, these are not fully cooked, fully formed songs for the most part. There are definitely some that I think are standouts, but they're standouts, I think, maybe because the other songs are just so bland and lifeless. And this is death metal. If anything, it should never be bland and lifeless, unless we're talking about, like, the Living Dead. Those can be lifeless at least, but those certainly aren't bland. They're fucking zombies. They're scary. What sucks is I like this band. I loved Fiendish. I thought that was an excellent fucking album, and that got me stoked for this one. But I'm really disappointed with this one. Like, I'm like super fucking let down. So overall, I'm gonna give this 2 stars. This is not very good. This whole thing feels very thrown together and just kind of like they went through the motions, assembled some bare bones riffs, and just said, fuck it, we're done. I mean, granted, I got Dan Swano to mix and master it, but even like the obviously awesome production on here could not save the songs from being just so meat and potatoes that there's nothing special about them. Again, there's a handful of tracks that I think are okay on here, but for the most part, they're okay just in comparison to some tracks in here that I think aren't very good at all. Again, this band had an album that came out earlier this year. I don't see why they rushed to put out a second album this year, but I didn't even know about that first album, so maybe that's why, maybe just to saturate the market with more of their music, 'cause I don't know, they want to get some sales. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff I'm kind of scratching my head about. Like, this just, you know, feels just very bland. Like, I don't get why it took forever to actually get to something a little bit more speedy. Like, they kind of just stuck to this mid-tempo thing the entire time, and it wasn't as though the riffs on top were like super creative or anything like that. It's just kind of standard death metal, like starter death metal. I'll be honest, going by the quality of the stuff that I heard on Fiendish, this sounds like something they could have churned out in their sleep. I think that's an absolutely solid album, and all of the energy that was on that album is pretty much missing on this one entirely. But still, I urge you to check it out for yourself, form your own opinions. If you like stuff like Dismember, Entombed, Bloodbath, maybe one of the 35 plus bands that Rugged Johansson's in. If you like that sort of thing, definitely check it out, form your own opinions. It wasn't for me, but that doesn't mean it might not be for you. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, as well as our store. We need to get some more stuff in there, but we still have some shirts available. And of course, a reminder to our patrons, we have polls going up for what will be our next batch of bands we will cover after we're done with Crowbar. Miller's is still up at this point. We need a tiebreaker on there, so if you are one of our patrons or would like to be one of our patrons, click the link down below and get on there and vote. Also, Denver Death Fest will be happening from April 20th through April 22nd in Denver, Colorado, because, again, it's Denver Death Fest. Where the fuck else would it be? We do have a special going on for now. I don't know if it will still be going on by the time this video comes out, but if you do a pre-sale ticket for the 3-day pass, you will get like 33% off. It'll be like $40. We will be making an announcement as to the lineup close to the new year, and I assume that might be the final lineup. There still might be room for us to add bands. I don't know. I'm, kind of just winging it here in terms of telling you details. This is mostly Miller and John's project, but I'm constantly doing videos, so I might as well like keep you updated as much as I can. But it sounds like it's going to be a good time. I can't wait to fucking be there, and hopefully you guys show up too. And of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. Again, this has been absolutely amazing, and it's entirely your fault it's amazing. Can't believe you'd do that. No, seriously, I enjoy the living shit out of this despite having a fucking cold and a voice that keeps getting raspier and raspier the more I talk, so I'm going to limit this one just for the sake of my fucking voice. So once again, thank you all so much, and we will catch you later.